The free market core mythology, to which both political parties in this country and just about all mainstream commentators are wedded to, argues in effect that, and here I'm kind of paraphrasing John Maynard Keynes, because he said this too about free market capitalism. The free market mythology, it argues that the most ruthless, selfish, opportunistic, greedy, calculating plunderers, applying the most heartless measures in cold-blooded pursuit of corporate interests and wealth accumulation, will produce the best results for all of us through something called the invisible hand. And Keynes really, he mocked that too. He didn't have as many adjectives as I did, but he said, how do they think that the most wicked, that was the word he used, the most wickedest people pursuing the most wickedest ends for the most wickedest means are going to produce these beautiful, what an interesting theory. Where the hell could they ever gotten it? Marx had 3 words to sum up the entire process of corporate capitalism. It was accumulate, accumulate, accumulate. And I like that quote because he's recognizing, he doesn't really go into it, he avoids psychology, and I usually do also, but I think it's time we have to treat some of these guys, put them on the couch or something. Since we can't put them on the guillotine, we have to, no, I didn't say that. He's giving this compulsive idea of accumulate. And what do you do after that? You accumulate, you accumulate. That's all they do, and that's all they need to do. Mindless, driven. It's a rational pathology. Are you still with me? Okay. The crimes and crises of corporate America are not, in my view, an irrational departure from a rational system. I don't think Bernie Madoff is an aberration. Quite the opposite. I think it's the converse. They are the rational outcomes of a basically irrational and amoral system. The multi-billion-dollar government bailouts are themselves turned into an opportunity for pillage. In other words, even when they've been stealing and they're getting money to compensate, they'll steal that money too. They'll steal from the contribution cup out there. Watch your property here. Not only does the state fail to regulate, it becomes itself a source of plunder, pulling vast sums from the federal money machine. We're exploited not only as workers, but as taxpayers and consumers. So if you work at, say, at a nonprofit and all that doesn't mean you're not exploited in this society. You're exploited as a citizen of the community. You're exploited, especially as a taxpayer. Who was it? Bacon. Which one? This is when you get old. You shouldn't stray from your notes. But some noted commentator who prefers not to be mentioned right now, he said, what the hell were we talking about? You know, it's happening to all of you too. I know. I remember now. The tax the public treasury is about the best investment that capitalists can make. They'll spend a few $1 million on lobbying and some campaign contributions, and then they'll get a contract for an oil reserve that's worth $20 billion. There's no investment you can make in the private business world of a few million and come out with $20 billion. And you can go on plundering and ripping off from the public treasure. It's about the best investment you can make is to buy politicians and then to buy the resources that belong to the people and walk off with it. These reactionaries who scold us for running to the government for a handout themselves run to the government for handouts. Why else would they have thousands of lobbyists? How many lobbyists do you have in Washington? Trying to scratch up. Be quiet. What do you mean? Some union or something? Is that trying to scratch up some money for you? How many lobbyists you have? I don't see any hands going up hardly. Corporate America yearly enjoys billions of dollars in subsidies, grants and aid, airwave licenses, loan guarantees, bailouts, tax breaks. You can go on. Export subsidies. With all the profits it pulls in every year, corporate America is on welfare, and we got to get them off welfare. The essence of free market corporate capitalism is the transformation of living nature into commodities and commodities into dead capital. So you take living nature and you get all these forms and you get it, and then you finally accumulate these abstract forms of wealth which are going to be answered. I mean, they're really all money and all treasury notes, all bonds, all stock. They're really sort of kind of promissory notes that there's a real world out there and value is going to keep getting created, and then this stuff I can cash it. I got these billions of dollars, you see. But it's kind of a depressive thing. It goes from living nature to this great amassing of dead capital. When left entirely on its own devices, capitalism foists its diseconomies and its toxicity upon the general public and upon the natural environment. And then it does an interesting thing. It eventually begins to devour itself. If the paladins of corporate America want to know what really threatens our way of life, it's their way of life. Their boundless way of pilfering the very community and environment that sustains them. And the more successful they are, the more deadly they become. Like any parasite. If it becomes too successful in its host, it does what? It kills the host, and it's going to be a catastrophe for the host, that's us, and for the parasite too. There's a myth that prosperity is shared by us all. More for them means more for me. I've heard that. I've interviewed people say, well, you know, the big company, if they create the jobs that and then there's something for me. We hear that a rising tide lifts all boats. You've heard that one, right? I always say a rising tide can sink a lot of ships and drown a lot of people. Still greater wealth for the very few, it means less and less for the rest of us.